Hi everyone, my name is Madeline, and for my resource review presentation, I'm highlighting the Education Amplifier resource. So a main reason why I chose this resource was when I was perusing the different options that we had according to the Teacher's Guide to Tech. I was really interested in making sure that there was a focus on critical thinking by the authors of these resources, and in the Q&A section of the Education Amplifier, there's a question listed, how can I frame these conversations without making it political? And social justice is inherently political because it's how that politics and is the way that legislation gets passed and we fight these actual issues. So I believe that the biggest thing that in public education we're supposed to be doing is encouraging critical thinking, because that's really just how things get done. But I was really interested in their response, which I'll read some parts of it. Allow students the opportunity to come up with their own conclusions about our individual identities look like and how our differences could create a collective American identity, and how it's important for each student to question, criticize, and form our own opinions. So I felt like this statement put this resource in a different level than a lot of the other ones, although I didn't look at a few of them, but I found this very interesting. And just the resource as a whole, I'll go on to the next slide. They provide different art prints free of charge to public educators, which is a very powerful tool in messaging, and they also provided a lot of lesson plans, which I'll get more into later. So back to the art as a message, I found these two particular art pieces that I found interesting because they're kind of going into two different parts of social justice. Starting with the picture of James Baldwin here. If you've never read any of his stuff, he's an absolutely fantastic writer. If you want to start in on his writings, I would recommend Sonny's Blues. It's like changes your whole perspective on music. But he's a very influential figure in like the civil rights movement, and I think it's very powerful that they chose to highlight him in this way. And then there's also this poster about mental health, which is very in the news in the past couple of years. So I found it interesting that these people who created this source are using art as a tool. And then there were also, in the lesson plans that they created, there were some interesting elements that I would definitely just cherry pick out from these lesson plans and use in other places. Like their use of this compass rose as a way of students organizing their thoughts. And just the fact that resources like this are out there is something that I learned from this. And how is the technology being used? So technology, the internet, is the way that the lesson plans and the art is disseminated into our public school system. And they also have remote lesson plans. And it looks like this resource was created in the 2020 pandemic, so there's a lot of influence from COVID-19 on this. And I thought this was just really cool. I made that connection myself. But and then also, how is technology being used? Using the internet as the main interface creates a community of learners being the public educators. And there is the social aspect of social justice, so you need this constant interaction between peoples, and technology, like computers, the internet, is where it is happening for this. And then moving on to the highlights, it is free, which is awesome. It's very customizable with the lesson plans that they provide. You don't have to follow every single part of it. You can cherry pick your way, and I think this is a good good place to cherry pick. And I also thought it was interesting how they use poetry and songs in their lesson plans. If you look more into their stuff, you'll see how they do it. And I felt, unlike most other sources, the lesson plans in the Education Amplifier use more, relied more on student critical thinking and student choice in the lesson plan process, and I'll talk more about that when it comes to my opinion. And then pitfalls. Some lesson plans need updating. Some of them are only for remote learning, which we're not in that era right now. But they're not completely inapplicable, but yeah, that needs some updating. There also is some limited content. There aren't very many lesson plans. I would say like maybe 20. I mean, that's probably enough, but at least the stuff that exists can be useful. And then onto my opinion, this is going to be very difficult to articulate, but just to put it simply, like, public schools have really become a battleground, I would say, within the past decade. I mean, what do I know? But public schools are definitely a place where a lot of, like, politics is clashing. And if I'm gonna identify myself as something, I'm a very progressive person. I believe in pretty much all the stuff that this resource is talking about, but I don't believe that it's necessarily the public school's responsibility to put these ideas into the students. But I do agree with them. But I think the most important thing that we can do is encourage critical thinking to lead the students to their own conclusions, which I do hope will be this. Like, just as an example, I took this picture from a lesson plan, and I believe in what they're saying here, but if I, like, put this picture back in my hometown, if I was a teacher in my hometown, and I put this picture on the screen, I would be brought to my boss's office the next day. There's a lot of stuff I could say about that, but I think we just need to focus on the critical thinking aspect, which will lead people to this. And then just a general nitpick, the source always talks about voting, but they never talk about how voting is an extension of your voice. And when you look at who we're teaching this to, they're people who can't vote, and instilling the importance, like the values of voting, is incredibly important, and that really starts when you're a kid. But making it seem like voting is the only thing you can do is not very productive. So that's just a general nitpick. And then some questions that we should ask ourselves. How can we as educators navigate backlash for featuring social justice focused poems or songs that are put in some of these lesson plans? And these are just a couple examples of songs that were featured. Dolly Parton's 9 to 5, wonderful song. And Bob Dylan's Blowing in the Wind, which is also a great song. Great cover by Peter, Paul, and Mary, too. And second question, how can we as educators be the best advocate for teaching of social justice? Again, very difficult question. There's no straight answer to this, and everybody's going to have a different one. But that's how we can have a productive conversation. How can we as educators spread the principle of nonpartisanship in these conversations? Like, again, I believe that nonpartisanship is very important in public schools. It's a principle of the public schools. We don't bring politics into the kids' lives, although a lot of this stuff shouldn't be politics. But yeah. And then citations. So thank you for listening, and yeah, have a great day.